Hello, Muskegon. How you doing? It's the 8th of January. I am Greg Roberts. It is 34 degrees in the ski, and it is time for turning to our first show of the year. Thank you guys. We missed you guys. There was so much information. We took a couple weeks off for the holiday, but we have to get back to the news. No top 10 list today. Just for housekeeping rules, if you would like to join the discussion, you can join the discussion by going to the WVS 103.7 The Beat Facebook or www.1037thebeat.com. Once again, you can go to Facebook site and to ask any questions, or you can go to the website. Like I said, today there comes a time when in a man's life you need a lawyer, a pastor, a doctor, and a professor. The only thing I didn't get is a bail bondsman because of what happened. My guest today is the prosecuting attorney is DJ Helson. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Greg. Happy New Year to you and to your fans. Glad to be here yet again with you. It's been a long time since I've done this, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful, sir. The doctor. We have a doctor in the house, president of the MCC, Dr. Dale Nesberry. How are you doing? We can't hear you. While he's getting that, I'll do the introduction of the next guy. You also need a professor. And the professor that we have is not only jump back and gotta kiss yourself, as James Brown say, Professor David Taki. How you doing?
I am fantastic, and that may be the best introduction I've ever had. I like James Brown in my intro from this point forward. It's good to be back with you, Greg.
Also, Pastor Melvin Burns will be joining us. First of all, I want to thank you guys because Wednesday, the texts and the conversations, you guys were checking on me because my blood pressure had to be over the roof. And there he is, Pastor Melvin Burns the second. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late.
So anyway, in a man's time, you need a combination, a lawyer, a pastor, a professor, and a doctor. I have it today because I need it. And the title of the show today is What the Hell Happened? What the hell happened and what now? That's the title. And we can't even talk about top 10s. We have to talk about Wednesday. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed.
All right. My first question is, what the hell happened? Somebody want to take the first stab at it?
Well, I can dive in. I'm sorry my audio wasn't working. It helps if I unmute myself. This is number 5 or so today. But we were talking a little bit earlier about circumstances in which we find ourselves today. And the comment came up, Jim Crow laws and slavery laws in this country were written by, no offense to the counselor on the call, and I guess myself, as I have a doctorate in law and policy and society, but written by lawyers and legislators. And if we allow that kind of behavior to manifest itself in our society, then what happened on Wednesday is more likely to happen. We need leaders to step up and make it clear that this kind of behavior is not acceptable. But that's my take.
So let's break it down. What was supposed to happen? Wednesday was supposed to be a ceremonial count by Congress of the Electoral College. This has happened normally about 51 minutes. Maybe you may have a challenge every now and then, but there was a plan to try to do something right in the middle of the first Arizona, that first challenge of Arizona. Everything broke loose. The vice president had to be pulled away. The third in command speaker had to be pulled away. And then they had to tell congressmen to reach under their seats to get gas masks as the Capitol had been infringed. Am I right so far? Am I missing anything?
You're right. Spot on.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right, Greg. And I want to just highlight something that you pointed out, that this is normally a pro forma event. This is normally something that is it's a ceremonial thing. And yes, while there have been challenges in the past, Maxine Waters has made some challenges in the past. These have almost always been kind of ceremonial, symbolic challenges. They're not supported on both sides of the House and the Senate. It's an opportunity to make a statement of objection, and then you move on. You're right, about 51 minutes. And the unique elements of the challenge process, where we actually had a senator willing to sign on and triggering the 2-hour debate period, that in itself was exceptional. But obviously what happened outside was even more exceptional. And that's a whole separate thing to discuss.
It was crazy. Our first question, and here I go with these glasses again. It says, I feel Black Lives Matter, they would have never made it to the door. But I feel some of the cops was on their side and let them in. There was actually some pictures of people were actually taking selfies with the guys that were coming in the building. And what do you guys think about our first question?
Well, I guess I haven't seen those images, Greg. I mean, what I saw when I was sitting in my office, and I turned on, it's very rare that you're going to see this ceremonial event on national TV. And so I kind of turned it on just to kind of watch it, and then watching it all unfold. And I'll tell you, what I saw was a small security Capitol Police force overwhelmed, basically pinned against doors. In fact, I learned today, maybe you guys have too, that of the there were people that lost their lives, and 4 of those, and at least one of those was a Capitol Police officer.
Yep.
And so, certainly if there are images there and there were officers that were complacent in their duties, they need to be fired, disciplined, whatever. But the images that I saw were a security force that was outmanned, outmatched, and basically at one point, I mean, this was in not the rotunda, but kind of the basement area of the U.S. Capitol, where you saw a line of officers, and they just got absolutely submerged like a tidal wave. There's a lot of questions that have to be answered in this whole event. One of the bigger questions is, why wasn't there a higher security presence? The point of the Black Lives Matter, they had a higher security presence. Where was that on Wednesday?
Right.
It wasn't a secret event. It wasn't like this was a surprise. And so where was the extra presence? Because clearly it was absolutely necessary.
Absolutely.
Folks need to answer that question along with many others.
And to go to your point, prosecutor, that the Speaker of the House has asked for a lot of people to resign. We have a question from Tyson Michelle. What about the local officials that took part from Muskegon County? Good question.
Yeah, I don't know of anybody that from Muskegon that was in Washington, D.C. I mean, clearly, if they were there, I mean, it's funny, as I was, as you make me do, Greg, I was doing some research before today's program, and one of the images that apparently has been identified was a lawmaker from West Virginia that had just been sworn into office was part of this. I mean,
oh yes,
you got to be kidding me.
Yes,
That again, whether there were laws violated there, whether he took part in laws being broken, that's an individual that doesn't deserve that position.
Now, one thing that we need to let you know is that you touched on a point that it was not a secret that this was going to happen. This was a planned event that everybody knew. That, matter of fact, the first arrest came from 5 guys out of Michigan, which happened yesterday. Terry Sabol, I am saddened for our country. I'm also concerned about our own state capitol security. We've already had near misses. Thank you, Terry, for that. And this is the time to look at everybody's security right now. So anyway, to go back to what I was saying is that it was a sad day. It was a sad day, and the loss of life. I'm sorry that, like, the woman shot in the Capitol. I'm sorry that she lost her life. Sorry for her family, but she was breaking through a breached area. Gentlemen, want to talk about that?
I don't know. I mean, I've visited DC a few times, had brothers live there, and enjoyed the museums and visiting the Capitol. And the very first time I went there to visit, they expressly talked about the Capitol building, White House, how strict security is. You go and you think, you don't see many people, and you see somebody go toward the fence, make a move, and people come out of nowhere, it seems.
Yeah.
And they're kind of famous for that. Again, what we saw the other day, and that's the part that shocked me the most. Then I thought about it again. In Michigan, we've allowed people to open carry in our Capitol building, and we ought to be rethinking all those things. But again, like the prosecutor doing some research and reading, understand that some of the National Guard was standing by, but I think we'll be seeing a lot more in the coming days about the responses, reviewing security. I was thinking, it reminded me, I was glued to the news, probably in my mind thinking I probably didn't pay attention to something unfolding like this probably since 9/11. I wanted to do something else, but let me check and see what's transpiring, because you almost didn't believe it.
Yeah, it was amazing, because you were texting me, "Are you up? Are you watching this?"
We started off talking about, I thought we were going to talk about the election. When as that unfolded, like, hey,
we should be talking about the election in Georgia, which a black man in Georgia and a Jewish guy won in Georgia, and now the Senate will be taken over by the Democrats with a 50-50. Now in the Senate, the vice president will break the ties and vote. I mean, in case there's a tie, we should be talking about today's job loss. Came out, jobs report, which showed that we lost jobs. There is a million things that we could be talking about, but how dangerous was what happened at the Capitol? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Dale. How dangerous to democracy was that happened? And I'm going to go to all you guys on that one.
Sure. I'll note that this is the second time in the history of our nation where the Capitol has been breached. The last time was, I believe, in 1812, and the next time was 2021. We've heard these numbers, these statistics in the last few days about the severity of this, and the danger to our society, from my perspective, is multiple. It's manifold, I'll say. Having the absolute certainty that you can walk into the Capitol building, or U.S. Capitol. I count the number of times I've been in the Capitol building in the last 20 years. I go there probably 4 times a year to visit my daughter, to do business primarily. And it's like 60 times. I'm there quite a bit, more than the average person, not from D.C. And it's to see what happened. It's very disturbing to the average viewer just to see that something like that can happen. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous from a perspective of having the the history. Well, let me just put it this way. I'm often asked about my perspective on this nation being the strongest, longest lasting democracy in recent world history. And I share with them that they need to be reminded that we weren't a full democracy until the mid 1960s. My dad couldn't vote in this country, in his home state of Tennessee, in 1951, which is why he moved to Michigan. That's my dad, and I'm kind of old guy. People look at me when I shave a beard off because people were calling me Santa Claus, right? But I don't think I'm over the hill really. But my dad couldn't vote in his home state. That's incredible. So we weren't a democracy until the mid 1960s, and that is demonstrated or manifested by the fact that we have people out there who would have caused him not to vote to be involved in these kinds of activities. Walking through the state or U.S. Capitol with a Confederate flag. We fought the bloodiest war in our history to cause that not to happen. And this person does that. So I think it's a threat to our democracy from a legal perspective, from a humanistic perspective, and from a perspective of how we're viewed by the rest of the world. Sorry for that long rant, but it's I have my full attention's been on this issue for about 3 days. So
Okay, Prosecutor DJ Hilson, how did you feel?
Yeah, look, obviously, I won't call myself a constitutional scholar by any stretch of the means, but clearly, I think one of the core principles of our democracy, of our country, is the right to express oneself, the right to certainly express oneself in a large group, and I think we've seen a lot of that this past year. In good ways and certainly in bad ways. And so I'm all for the right to peacefully protest. I mean, I think that's a way for many voices to basically provide their opinion, and they do so without fear of the military cracking down on them. I think of those images at Tiananmen Square where the young student standing in front of that tank. We don't necessarily have to worry about that in America because it's our right to do that. But when you escalate it to what happened on Wednesday, you've basically taken that right from the Constitution and spit on it, as far as I'm concerned. The act of violence to try and send a message is never the answer. It's never appropriate. It's never the right response. And so once you move from the First Amendment right to assemble and protest to a violent action, you've given up, your right to claim that as a right. And that to me was the disgusting aspect of this. And quite frankly, to see the celebratory nature of these individuals as they're climbing on statues and hooting and hollering and waving flags and running around the Capitol building and causing destruction. That's not democracy. That's not expressing your opinion. That's not your right. And a lot of them, I know, are going to find their way into a courtroom because it may take a month or two, but they're already working on it, and they're going to find their way in a courtroom, and they're going to see some other constitutional rights in action. So, I mean, ultimately, justice, I hope, will prevail here. But yeah, I mean, clearly a black eye for democracy, for sure.
Professor.
Prosecutor Hilton is right in that people should be able to express themselves legally and constitutionally without fear of a military kind of crackdown or reprisal. And it's that fact that helps set the contrast. That's the first real big issue about what happened on Wednesday. Because we've seen people peacefully assembling for this entire year and meeting that kind of military crackdown resistance. Seeing massive use of force, seeing federal troops called into places like Portland against the will and wishes of the individual municipal leaders. And we've seen people whom are, in fact, protesting peacefully, being reacted to very negatively and very forcefully by law enforcement. And to take that imagery and put it next to this, in which you had a well-documented, well-broadcast event, one that the president promised would be wild, and was accompanied by, easily accessible intelligence chatter about potentially violent intent online, received no escalation of force, no presence, no show of force. There's a picture going around that shows the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with a fully militarized police force, essentially, during one of the Black Lives Matter protests this summer. And if that had been the scene on the front of the Capitol, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that divide is a big problem, because participating in democracy, feeling safe in democracy, feeling equal in democracy requires people to be equal under the law. And it sure doesn't look that way when you put those two images next to each other. Next, yes, the Capitol was breached. Not only was it breached to the degree that they had to stop a constitutionally required proceeding, it was breached to the degree that our vice president, our president pro tem of the Senate, had to be evacuated.
Right.
People were in fear for their lives. Right now, the count is 5 of them who lost their lives. 2 gentlemen had medical issues. One lady, they haven't released it, but the woman who was shot was breaching through a window into a protected area where there were staff and members of Congress. And that's one thing I want to comment here, is that obviously there was a tremendous miscalculation in terms of security that happened prior to the incident. But once the incident began, in hearing the reports and the standard procedures of the Capitol Police, they're generally under orders not to exchange property for escalation. So if it's a matter of, them ruining a barricade or a barrier, or, messing with the statue, they're not going to escalate a scenario in which human lives could be lost in order to protect the statue. But that helps highlight just how important that interaction in the hallway was.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they can no longer protect the safety of the humans in the building, that's when they responded with deadly force.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tragic that they had to. But the idea that we saw these people who were there largely because they had been tragically misinformed by the executive acting in this manner, threatening the lives and safety of our elected officials, trying to put a stop to a constitutionally mandated process, that's severe in terms of the role of the executive and the responsibility that they bear. And then we have to go back to that dichotomy one more time, because the vast majority of those people walked out of that building without being arrested.
And that's incredible. Just incredible on that point. Pastor Melvin Burns, how do you feel?
Yeah, great comments, Beverly. But let me just follow up, I think, with the professor there. I live with my 20-year-old daughter, and I was thinking, I remember she was in elementary school, and I'll be brief, but it was something they were upset about, and she was like, we're going to protest. Like, honey, that's not how it starts. It's like, no, you start off, meet with the principal, whatever. And I don't remember the situation, but I remember they never got to the protest. Whatever it was, they got a hearing and something got changed, and took her to her first vote when she was 18. She went to the Black Lives March this summer, and I was telling her things to do and not do. If it gets crazy, this is how you get out of here and come home. So I'm watching this with her Wednesday, and I'm thinking all these things I'm trying to teach her about. I bought onto this process when I was young. You vote, you can protest, you can go to meetings, you can run for office. I'm bought into all of that. And so I'm sitting there Wednesday, and there's a part of me that's bought into this whole government process. It was really, I'm like, I'm hurt because I'm seeing this. I'm like, you go to DC, you see the Lincoln Monument, you go to, you see all these things, and you're like, I'm a part of this. Despite my history as African American, I'm still a part of this, and I'm still kind of proud of that. And so part of me is really hurt. But then the other thing I'm going to tackle on that what Professor said is there's a responsibility in this democracy that everybody has, whether you're an individual voter, whether you're protesting, and the president has a responsibility for this democracy.
Mm-hmm.
The president of college, there are certain things, whether he's still the president of the college or not, he just would never say or do. The prosecutor, are certain things, you don't lose a case and then go talk about the judge personally. There are just certain things, and part of this is sometimes you learn you don't get your way, and sometimes you lose. But part of your responsibility is, I've committed to this legal process, I've committed to this education process. So even when I don't get my way, I don't burn this thing down.
Right.
And that's probably one of my big takeaways. And going forward from this is If you're going to get in politics, plan to lose, because there's a good chance you will.
Oh, picking those signs up in the rain.
But you have President down, you still have a responsibility to this thing that you served for 4 years. And that doesn't end just because you lost. It doesn't end, you hold that for the rest of your lifetime. And I think he completely walked away from that. And we saw a sad example when that happens by those statements and, what he inflamed.
There's so much news that is happening. Richard Burnett is the guy that was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's desk. They've just arrested him. So the arrests continue, and the producers of the show are just tagging in more and more information. Guys, do you feel that this, when we looked at Black Lives Matter or George Floyd or every protest that they had in Washington, D.C., they were ready for? This was a known protest. This was a protest that people knew that was going to be a heavy one. Is there a double standard when it came down far as protection for Black Lives Matter, or anyone for that matter, versus what happened that day?
Yes.
Hey, sis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, listen, Greg. I mean, clearly, there was an absolute drop of the ball here, and I agree with you. The double standard. I mean, and I'll be interested. I'm going to be interested to hear what people say, at those levels. If they make excuses or they take it and they're resigning, they're quitting, or whatever.
A lot of being asked to quit and step down, and they are.
Yeah, and well, I mean, but you're talking about the leaders of the Capitol Police. That's one level, but we're talking about Washington D.C. We're talking about where all the policymakers and the big executives live and work, and there's so much security floating around that area that, I mean, I think it was said before, we don't even know how much security is floating around that area. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Yet, when you have this group being fired up even before they got to Washington D.C., let's not kid ourselves, in assembling in the mass that they were assembling, and then moving from that area, the speech area, if you will, and walking the streets, and not having a semblance of any type of security at all at the various areas that we want to protect and hold dear, far be it from the U.S. Capitol. I struggle with that. I tell you, that bothers me. And I saw the image. I saw the image of the Black Lives Matter and the militarized look as they stood probably about 100 strong across the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And clearly, obviously, those memorials are precious and we have to protect them. But I agree. Where was that? Where was that presence?
Right. Dr. Dale.
If they would have had that presence surrounding the U.S. Capitol, there's no way those people get anywhere near those steps.
Right. Dr. Dale, you were going to add a comment on that.
But I think DJ's done an excellent job explaining the environment. But I don't know if you can see over my left shoulder, but there's a Boston Police Department arm patch there on my wall. And I keep that as a reminder that my time working with the Boston Police Department as a sworn official, as their research and technology director for a number of years, and having researched this issue for years and years, it's incredible to me that the strategic planning process that is in place and that we know has to be in place for the Capitol Police did fail utterly. Someone, as DJ noted, did drop the ball. And having been through those doors, anytime you walk through a gate in the Russell building, in the Longworth building, in the Capitol, there are at least, I've never seen fewer than 3 Capitol Police there. That's the tactical implementation of the strategic plan that this law enforcement agency has to protect those who work there and visit.
Mhm.
I mean, as far as I could tell, I mean, I wasn't there this time. There's none of that, which was just incredible to me. What were they doing? I can't explain, but I do know that there wasn't a force that is typically there when I visited those many times. So that's very disturbing to me that could come to fruition.
I reached out to some of my pro-Trump buddies, and to have them on the show, like I said, they only agreed to one thing, that no harm should have came. They shouldn't have rushed the Capitol, but other things that they came up with were not truthful, and that's where they are not here today. Was this an insurrection, guys? David?
Well, that's a specific term when you start talking about applying it constitutionally. In colloquial language, could it be described as an insurrection? Absolutely. Is it potentially constitutionally prosecutable as an insurrection? That's a little more vague, though you clearly at this point in time have individuals who willfully and maliciously disrupted the process of governance in the United States at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
You have, trespass. You have destruction of property. There's some more finite federal charges, but also, just to kind of double this into our previous question, it's important to note that the Capitol building of Washington, D.C. is incredibly unique given its different layers of policing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the Capitol Police, you've got the DC Metro Police, you've got all of the different FBI, DIA security forces that are available there in Washington, DC. Then you've got specifically, elements of the National Guard, plus additional forces that normally are brought in from Maryland and Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question about whether or not a military presence, one, was going to be good or bad for optics. And two, just to remind everybody, there's been significant concern that at some point in time, the president might issue orders to the military to help him stay in power unconstitutionally. So again, there's reasons why you maybe didn't want a bunch of military around on the Capitol Mall that day. All of this stuff layers together, and it's incredibly difficult to break through. But in terms of, was this insurrection, I would leave it to a federal prosecutor to decide whether or not they wanted to make that case. But the elements of the case are there.
Anybody else on that question before we move on? Thomas Jefferson said in 1785 about a deposition that we need a shock in the system every 200 years or so to wake up a democracy. Was this that shot? Melvin?
I think probably 200 years is way too long, but I hope so. Like everybody been thinking a lot about this. I think it changes. I hope it changes how the president's Biden sees it. I think people kind of lead from their personality. I hope it changes some of how President Biden approaches his presidency. I don't want to go into, but I hope it changes. I hope it changes how even our representatives see their job. You just can't say anything that Congress is supposed to be debate, agreement, disagreement. It's supposed to be, like we're talking, making deals. It's supposed to be people coming to some conclusions, and not always just because I have the most votes I win. So I hope some of those things are reconsidered. That's what the democracy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the majority looks out for the interest of the minority, not winner take all. So I'm hoping maybe from this we start to rethink some of those things. The president will have the House and the Senate, of course, on a lot of issues. Some of those people will come from districts that are, close, where they won't always follow the president. But I believe in a democracy where everybody gets represented, even if you don't have the numbers. So I'm hoping some things we get out of this.
Doctor, was this a nepotism?
Nepotism in terms of the president and some of his appointments along the way. I would describe it this way. I've held a number of positions in my career. I'm currently president of Muskegon Community College, and God willing, I will retire from this position in the not too distant future, but I have a daughter who has a master's degree in public administration, and is well trained in public policy and administration. I have a wife who's a psychologist who's led national conferences, has been a practitioner for almost 30 years. Now, they have the skills and talents to serve in my administration in any number of roles, but I would never think of doing that kind of thing, placing my wife, my daughter, they have skills, they have talents, but no, no, you can't do that. It just looks bad, sounds bad, and in terms of practice, it's just not a good practice for a leader. So I think on top of everything else that's happened, it's difficult to trust a leader who would do those kinds of things, who would place people who should be unbiased from a personal perspective in positions where bias is automatically assumed. And I'll defer to my colleagues here on the panel. This is an outstanding panel, so I'm blessed to be a part of it. So, colleagues, what say ye?
DJ.
What? So, I guess, Greg, clarify the question for me, because I think
what he was Thomas Jefferson saying, that you need this shake up, because you might have where the people create a king, and you need to shake up or stop the wolves. My question is, was this that shock to the system to wake it up?
Boy, if it is, I'd like it to be a little more tempered next time. Certainly, I'm hoping. I'm really hoping that, and maybe you're seeing a little bit, whether it's done for political purposes or for PR purposes. You're seeing a lot of once staunch supporters kind of jump ship a little bit, and again, whether that's sincere or that's just being done for the PR aspect of it, that's for those folks to kind of ferret out. But I mean, quite frankly, I would hope that as we move forward into the next 4 years here, that we get back to a little more diplomacy, and we get rid of some of the division. And that it's probably not gonna happen overnight. And certainly, I think this particular event, hopefully, kind of shocks people's conscience, that our policymakers, that is, and they recognize and understand that, you guys and gals have to really figure out what's best for the American people, and how you're going to get it done on a bipartisan type level, and set aside, hopefully set aside some agendas and what have you, and let's just get done what needs to be done for the goodness of America. I tell you what, I'm still very proud of the American flag. I still really believe in this country, and I love every aspect of it. I love the opportunities that have been given to me as a United States citizen, and I want to see kind of that sentiment ring now at our highest levels of government, because the last thing we need is the world now looking at us going, holy crap,
which they are, by the way.
Yeah, they don't have their stuff together here, and maybe America isn't as solid as we think it is. That to me is sending the absolute wrong message, because we are by far one of the greatest countries in the world, and we need to start acting like it.
David, I want you to address that question, but I want to start now, because looking at time, to switch our hats and go, where do we go now? And does the Vice President Pence, who is awfully mad right now, invoke the 25th Amendment? And Dave, we talked about this. Could you explain the 25th Amendment to people?
Sure. So the 25th Amendment came about after President Eisenhower back in the 50s had some heart problems. And they realized that should the president become incapacitated, there was no means by which they could actually do anything about it if he was in a coma or unconscious. So they introduced the 25th Amendment to create a means by which the president could be kind of shifted out of his position, potentially temporarily in the terms of a momentary incapacitation, or more permanently if there were a larger issue. We've only used it a few times in history, and it's always been the president themselves invoking the 25th when they're going in for a medical procedure or something like that, so that the security of the nation would be otherwise well taken care of. The 25th Amendment also allows for the vice president to put the issue to the 15 members of the permanent cabinet. And provided he gets a majority of those members to sign on, then he can then notify both the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem of the Senate that he has basically taken over the presidency. The president can then feasibly appeal that, and in either case, the House must convene, or the Congress must convene both houses within 48 hours of being notified in order to deal with the issue.
Mm-hmm.
What's noteworthy is that once they convene, they actually have 21 days to render a decision. And obviously, if they support the 25th Amendment invocation with a supermajority of both houses, then the president would be permanently removed and the acting vice president would ascend to the presidency. If they decide, no, that's not true, then the president would resume his duties. And I'm sure there'd be all sorts of interesting fallout after that. But what we've seen as of recent is that it doesn't look like, as of today, Mike Pence is supportive of invoking the 25th Amendment, which creates a scenario in which the only thing between Trump and another 12 days of his administration would be articles of impeachment being passed.
Tanya Roberts Ford, from one of our people from Georgia, says, I find it interesting that it took the Congress to be put in danger, rush the bunkers, and personally feel the hate and anger from the right. Wow.
Yeah.
For them to take action against Trump, where have they been for the last 4 years? And thanks for that question. I'm going to say this. Do you guys feel that if the president, normally, like today, I surrounded myself with the best, brightest minds. I know he tried to do that, but he didn't. He was afraid. No, he didn't want yes men or no man around him. In other words, people that told him the truth, he didn't want it. He wanted his way. The Congress, the first 2 years, did hold up some friction. But the following 2 years, it was just the Trump party. Do you feel that this is Trump's party now? And what do we have to work on? What's gonna happen to the GOP? Anyone?
Well, listen, that's a great question, Greg, and certainly. I think you see a fractured party, and what's going to be interesting is now the fallout. So if you recall, you talk about midterm elections and those that were wanting Trump's support to win their midterm election, and now I think, quite frankly, from a political perspective, they probably want to run far, far away. Hence your opening comment about Senator Ted Cruz, who miraculously, apparently over 4 years, somehow was whispering to somebody his distrust with Trump and what he said. I don't know who he was whispering to, but he was whispering to somebody apparently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously it's interesting from a political perspective. You watch when things like this happen, and you watch the rats scurry a little bit, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
They're not scurrying; they're jumping ship.
Well, listen, they're swimming, they're parachuting, they're doing everything they can, and so, quite honestly, it's going to be interesting to see what happens after January 20th and the impact that Trump has moving forward, because certainly had he done things a little bit differently, maybe his impact is a little bit different. But now you're going to have your small pocket of supporters, and that's about it, in my opinion. And whether or not that's enough to do anything moving forward, I guess remains to be seen. But I can tell you right now, I bet you on a national level, the GOP will be skirting as far away from this dude. And you probably won't see him at too many rallies come midterm in 2022 or 2023, I should say. You probably won't see him at too many rallies.
DJ, I think I'm going to disagree with you. Hold on. Kelly Reed, if Pence invokes the 25th, can he pardon Trump
And
company?
Answer is yes, he could.
Yes. Go ahead, Doctor. Dr. Professor. Go ahead, Professor.
Well, okay. I'm gonna hit you with a trifecta here. I'm gonna try to wrap three of these things together. You had asked about a spark, right?
Right.
And the spark that we saw yesterday was different than a lot of other sparks because this one hit everybody. All right. People have been comparing it to 9/11 because it hit a big symbol of America that everybody felt. But there have been sparks this entire administration, all right, whether it was the comments about soldiers or the unrefuted Russian bounties, or it was Breonna Taylor, or it was George Floyd. There have been these sparks, but the one that happened on Wednesday hit everybody. And I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing the changes from the Republican Party is now they feel, oh boy, we have essentially aided and abetted this guy who's been digging democracy out from underneath us, and now there's not much left supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mm-hmm. So that may be why this shock feels differently. Because not only did it hit everybody, but it hit the people who were kind of behind Trump this whole time. And that's also one of the things we're going to see moving forward. He has a lot of power amongst his base.
And $500 million beside it that he said he's going to fight people.
Absolutely. But the establishment Republicans have never necessarily wanted to go along with what he is saying. And this is their opportunity to split, for them to regain control of their party and for the Republican Party to kind of maintain ideologically consistent conservative values. They can't be the Trump party anymore. And this may be the breach that allows for a lot of principled conservatives to try to step away. But we have also seen the Ted Cruz's and the Josh Hawleys try to step in and assume the mantle of this deceptive counterfactual populism that Trump has made his brand. So where is the GOP going to go? It's going to be in crisis for a bit. And it's going to have a big identity problem going forward here. And the question is going to be whether or not, I guess, the loyal opposition of, conservatively minded, patriotic Republicans gain control of the party and can kind of, return to the same reality as the rest of us, or if this Trumpist kind of measure takes hold. And right now, that's a coin flip. That's up in the air.
Pastor Burns,
good comments. I don't know. You think about the last 60 days of the presidential campaign and this last election in Georgia. The president didn't talk about his victories. He didn't talk about the vaccine. He didn't talk about the economy, maybe getting back on track. It was all about him and those people and what they might do to the country. The race in Senate race in Georgia became almost a referendum on Trump. And so, again, how does that party get back to this is what the Republican Party is? They got a lot of work to do. So I don't know. Definitely, we all see it fractured. Maybe we'll see some other elections later in the year, but I don't know how they recover the identity because as of now, it is Trump's party. Some people like Cruz and Hawley who've tried to say these last few days, nobody's buying it so far.
And Johnny Roberts Ford again, everybody wants to jump the ship now.
Yeah, people are not impressed. Most people don't seem impressed by the ship jumping at all. I don't think that's.
I'm not impressed because if you should have did something later. Let me see. Where are my glasses?
Yeah. Counterfactual makes me giggle. I already said lie several times. I was trying to give different words for it.
All right. Now, guys, in your mind, and this is going to go to everyone, is at 2:50. Is it? I know what the speaker is trying to do. She says if they don't invoke the 25th Amendment, that they want to impeach the president. Is it too late? Should we just say, President, go to Florida and just play golf and just be quiet, don't say anything, and everybody who has the football with the nuclear codes kind of hide it from them? So do they try to do we go down that road of impeachment with only 2 weeks to go?
No, because of what happened, if I could just jump in quickly and note that this has been the most, I think, disruptive action by our government. Again, I'm 65 in my lifetime, so I think they can't not at least consider this. What is it, 14 days, 13 days now? It's not very much time. We understand how long the previous impeachment of President Trump took. It was months. The trial was expedited, and that was, as I recall, over a week. Go back to Richard Nixon, the previous impeachment process before that. These things take time, and it's unfortunate that the time is limited given what's occurred recently as well as over time in the Trump administration. So I believe the impeachment process should begin from what actually occurred here, but there's just simply not enough time given our process of government to move it through.
DJ.
Well, what's interesting is, to Dr. Dale's point, I mean, obviously drafting the articles takes more, well, at least this last time took more time than the actual trial itself. And, I think Trump felt relatively empowered because he was already being told by the Senate or the leaders in the Senate that it wasn't going anywhere, that this was just form over substance. I think the message would be far different today if articles are filed, and certainly the whether there's a trial or not, it's still, even after he's done, it still can take place. I mean, it doesn't preclude impeachment from happening. So, if they're so inclined, I can guarantee you there probably won't be, outside of, again, that base, outside of that base, there probably won't be a lot of resistance. And I would expect hearing a different voice coming from the Senate and the House on that issue.
Professor, what about censure?
So censure would be an option if we were to see an article of impeachment essentially pass the House and get to the Senate where they would fail to convict. I think DJ's on the right track with the idea that there is nothing saying that a impeachment trial has to stop when the president leaves office. And one of the big reasons why you might actually see it happen is because impeachment can result in two potential punishments upon conviction. The first one is removal from office, which becomes moot if we're after the 20th. But the second one is a prohibition on holding future office. And that might be of very keen interest to not only the Democrats in the Senate, but also the Republicans in the Senate, who then remove Trump as a force for 2024 and beyond. If they're looking to regain control of their party and send a clear message that Trump's nakedly corrupt behavior is unacceptable, then that might be the way to try to thread the needle, right?
I want to say this. Can we all agree that this is not a Democrat issue? This is not a Republican issue or independent. This is an issue of people in charge, that a bad thing happened to our republic, our democracy, and it was wrong. It was wrong, and people should be put under the jail, because I don't want people to think that we're saying we're just picking Republican Day. No, we are standing up for this country and the Constitution, and anyone that thinks that they can just somehow get rid of it. Gentlemen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you, Greg, and we probably have some of the same Republican friends. I mean, I think one of the great things is the ability to work with both sides of the aisle, if you will. And we can always agree to disagree on certain issues, but at the end of the day, there's no way that anybody doesn't stand for, democracy. There's just no way. And so this really isn't a political issue. It's a democracy issue. And so, I mean, if you're against democracy, okay, but I bet you're not going to find too many people that are going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dale.
Oh, I agree, and I would further point out that there are individuals of conscience on both sides of the aisle who would agree with this as well. What gives me hope is that those people are finally starting to speak out.
Mm-hmm.
They've had the legal authorization, the constitutional authorization to do so, but only this last set of incidents, as the good professor rightly pointed out, has moved them forward. So indeed, I agree.
Pastor Burns.
Yeah, and I've gone back and forth about this whole thing about, impeachment, 25th Amendment, but clearly some message has to be sent going forward. We talk about the time constraints, but there just has to be some kind of message to set the tone going forward. It's not, okay, 14 days, let him run off into the sunset. I don't think that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's sufficient. In fact, I think that's probably a dereliction of responsibility to just, okay, he's gone in 14 days. Let that be it. I'd love to be in on some of the discussions that have gone on the cabinet members. I don't think, as the professor said, that Pence is in on the 25th Amendment. I certainly believe there's been some discussions about how do you protect the rest of us these next 14 days. That's be what you get a sense of, is that they've thought about how do we, stop Dr. Frankenstein's monster from, attacking the village again. And so, censure might be, again, an option. Just have to go through the whole procedure. But I think it'd be irresponsible at this point to not take some kind of measure that sends the American public and sort of resets how we're supposed to view our democracy and the role and responsibility of every single person, including our president, in this democracy.
Professor.
The truth is bipartisan. If we are speaking out, we are speaking out against falsehood. We are speaking out against dereliction of duty. We are speaking out against a narrative that has convinced, millions of Americans that they are being robbed of an election that was conducted freely and fairly. You leave the initials off the back end, right? It doesn't matter if it's an R or a D. There are people who are telling the truth and there are people who are not. And it doesn't matter what letter comes after that.
That's right.
We as Americans have to stand up for the principles of our Constitution, for the truth, and for each other.
Right.
And there are people on both sides of the aisle who are doing that, and they deserve to be lauded for it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the way it's worked right now is that those who have largely been duped and manipulated by Trump are more concentrated on one side of the aisle than the other. And we can't let partisanship stop us from speaking truth to power and helping those people come back into the fold. This can't be partisan. It has to be about truth and facts and American honor.
Guys, we want to go back to Terry Sabone. We're going to have you on the show, Terry. This is not an R or D issue. It's an American issue. Gentlemen, I want to take this time to thank you guys for being on the show, because the thing is that we want to, two things I want to bring up. First point, having some educators here. It explains and it dictates the reason why we need political science and civics class back in schools as early as possible.
Yes, sir.
So people will understand what is going on. And two, so people won't be fooled like they were fooled thinking Wednesday that they could show up and stop a procedure that they could not stop. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We have to say goodbye on that note. Thanks again. You have been watching Torrent 2 live, the first show of 2021. We'll see you, and we're looking forward to a good year. Take care, and God bless.
On behalf of everyone in our community and in healthcare, thank you for doing your part.
We appreciate your doing your part to keep us all safe.
When in public, stay 6 feet away from others.
Wash your hands often for at least 20 seconds with soap and water.
Wear a mask. Together, we are slowing the spread of this virus.
And together, we are saving lives.